Good afternoon, dear George. Thank you for taking for the interview to the Foundation to Battle Injustice. Please tell our viewers and readers a few words about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm an investigative journalist. I broke a lot of the stories from the beginning, from Maidan forward, and how the war started, and done a lot of investigations into the info war, discovered who was behind it, the people running it, the type of psychological program they use, the software they use, who's involved with it, and factors, and the people that are a lot of research on the historical aspects of the back to the First World War.
This is impressive.
Pardon?
This is impressive.
Well, it's been 9 years.
Right.
I've made a lot of headway with it. I'm quoted in, I'm cited in about 400 academic papers on the history of Ukraine, information war, psychological warfare, the history of the conflict. Here, about 20 books on the same subjects, and U.S. politics, etc., etc.
For a long time now, you have been investigating the crimes of Ukrainian servicemen in the Donbass. Please tell us what brought you here.
Well, I didn't come here for the war. I was actually here a long time before that. I moved to Ukraine in 2010 with my wife. She's from here. And originally, well, she has family in West Ukraine and in Donbass. Originally, we lived on the Moldovan border for 2 years. So I got to know people there. In 2012, we moved to Donbass, which is where most of her family is. She hadn't been home in over 20 years. So it was time for her to come home. And that's why we came here.
I see. How do you assess the progress of Russia's special military operation on the territory of Ukraine? Do you think it was possible to resolve this conflict peacefully?
No. The push for the war started really hard in March 2021. And at that point, I knew that it was going to start, that Russia would have to answer. So the military operation had to begin because every peace overture that Russia made to resolve what was then, it was the issue of Minsk. And on top of that, Joe Biden and Ukraine, Zelensky, tried to cut Russia out of the European gas markets, which they did. So Nord Stream 2 was the big deal back then. And the reason for that is they wanted Europe to feel Ukraine's pain. So if Europe's suffering, well, yes, they're going to support a war in Ukraine to, I guess, get revenge, even though they did it themselves by refusing gas contracts that were offered to them. You know, media in the West were saying that Russia wasn't supplying the gas that was promised when Russia actually fulfilled all the contracts, and Europe didn't buy enough because of the COVID epidemic. The gas demand was a lot lower, and when COVID started easing up, the gas demand went way beyond supply. Instead of signing a new contract, Europe decided to buy spot pricing, which is very, very expensive. And the whole thing was exacerbated from there. Last year, they knew Ukraine's economy was going to fail. They knew that without the gas, the manufacturing plants would fail. Cities would have to ration energy. Businesses were going to go under. Ukraine was failing. And the starting a war, which is from Zelensky's point of view, what they did, because they started this.
Right.
It was the only way to cover up the country failing. You have that. Now we have a food shortage, which is caused by, again, Ukraine and Joe Biden. It didn't have to be this way. It just, none of this that the world is going through right now had to happen.
How do you assess the role of the United States in the conflict in Ukraine? In your opinion, for what purpose did the American political leadership allocate billions of dollars to create a Ukrainian democracy?
Well, it's actually a little bit more complex because it has a lot more to do with the Ukrainian diaspora lobbies, the money that they put into the government, funding Congress's reelection, we'll say, and Joe Biden, the relationships they've built. The lobby, it's called the Ukrainian Congressional Committee of America, is actually larger than the lobby of Saudi Arabia. Now, they're supposed to be for the good of Ukraine, but what they're doing is, what they've set up is fund a war against Russia, and afterward, divide up the spoils of Ukraine and whatever's left of Russia, okay, as the country breaks apart. That's what this is about. So it's about graft money like Biden and Burisma, Hunter Biden, and this goes a lot further beyond that. Now, when they started, when Russia started taking areas that had the biolabs in them, and they started uncovering paperwork, Hunter Biden's name came up right away as an investor. It's an accident. Just the tip of the iceberg. What about nuclear? What about other sectors of business? And then you have the big agriculture business, which is Ukraine. You know, if they don't have the grain, they sold it to Turkey last year, oversold it, and they have to buy flour from Turkey. Why are they shipping the grain out now? They've set themselves up to cause a famine, so millions of people are going to suffer. The U.S. knows about this. The EU knows about this, and it's because it was pre-planned. They could have stopped this last year. Instead, here we are.
Are you aware of the extent of the spread of neo-Nazis idea on the territory of Ukraine? The Ukrainian government regularly provided financial assistance to nationalist battalions to spread their ideology. Does this mean that the Kyiv regime consciously supports an ultra-right ideology?
Well, first of all, we need to put the talk about neo-Nazis to the side. And we need to talk about real Nazis. Real Nazis don't like these violent children with tattoos. Real Nazis wear business suits and sundresses and have barbecues that normal people like you and me go to. You'd never be able to tell them from a normal person in terms of what they think, unless they feel comfortable enough around you to start discussing it openly. Now, in Ukraine broke away from the Soviet Union and they established their independence. They took their flags, symbols, and the power of government from the diaspora government in exile. And that up, it was on a contractual basis. They signed on a piece of paper. They were going to set up the government in the same way Simon Petliura's government was set up in 1917, 18, 19. Well, Simon Petlura, was he a neo-Nazi? No, he was a Nazi. If you use that as a short term for nationalist. So this is the form of government that Ukraine has had since 1991. And these are the political views. Well, what was so bad about Simon Petlura? Well, Petlura didn't have any support in what we call Ukraine today, all right? He murdered a few 100,000 people to try to get that power. That is the government. That's the basis of what's going on today. So from the beginning, they've been this way. But from 1991 to 2014, It was action that had control. And they wanted to try to do things through diplomacy and corrupt the people into being Ukrainian nationalists slowly. It didn't work. So first you had the Orange Revolution. The diaspora wasn't happy with the results. They said the people are too Russian, too Sovietized. And if you don't get this right, we're going to have another revolution, and we guarantee that the leadership of Ukraine will not survive it. They actually said this. And this was a man who was the last president in exile. His name is Mykola Plavyuk. Now, as they rolled around to Maidan, Mykola Plavyuk and a woman named Slava Stetsko. Have you ever heard of her?
Yes, I have.
Yes, Slava Stetsko was running the pogroms in World War II with her husband and with Stepan Bandera. She became the worldwide leader of Bandera. Both Plavyuk and Stetsko, after the Orange Revolution, took over children's groups in Ukraine, created a generation ready for Maidan. That's what happened. So you had that generation of leaders, the core people that created the violence were brought up by World War II Nazis. And we talk about neo-Nazis, but you really can't with Dmitry Yarosh. When Slava Stetsko first came to Ukraine again in 1990, I think it was 1992, she started a group called, she started a political organization called the Congress of Ukrainian Nationalists. She started a militant wing called Tryzub Banderi. In 2006, guess who became the leader of Tryzub Banderi? It was Dmitry Yarosh. He was her bodyguard, and he learned his politics directly from a World War II Nazi, not a neo-Nazi. Politician that came out of Maidan, Poroshenko, Yushchenko, Timoshenko, they all learned their politics from Slava Stetsko. Are they Nazi or neo-Nazi?
Neo-Nazi.
Jews. You're not going to Jews there. You're not going to find many Heil Hitlers there. It's Slava Ukraina and Slava Banderi. Okay? They're the real thing. So if we shift the conversation from these little tattooed neo-Nazis, did you know Adolf Hitler hated neo-Nazis?
No.
Did you know that?
No.
No? He had a whole bunch of them. Okay? They started out as Antifa. They became the brown shirts. And they became so obnoxious, they acted like Pravi Sector. They became so obnoxious, he had the Night of the Long Knives to get rid of them. The ones that survived, the ones that didn't have the tattoos and didn't get drunk or do drugs, became the SS. That's the way it works.
How would you comment on the recent decision of the current US President Joseph Biden to allocate $40 billion in aid to Ukraine? Why, in your opinion, is the American president not interested in problems inside his country?
Well, it's too. Biden really doesn't care about America that was. He cares about the America he wants, which is based on an America. It's a lot easier to run a country if no one can argue with you. What he wants. That's the America he wants. Now, this 40 billion. Now, I tracked where the funds are going. A lot of to pay for the weapons that Ukraine already got. All right. So the weapons that were delivered, now they're paid for. And part of it's going to aid that Ukraine already got. The weapons, the aid, the everything. all right? And that 40 billion is atrocious. And then on top of that, Zelensky gets what, another 8 billion a month? What is this, a COVID stimulus? I mean, give me a break. Now, we have a larger problem across Ukraine, and it's going to take some time, especially for Russians, to get a handle on this. Most of the Ukraine are Russian. People in Ukraine are being treated like they're Russian. They've been tortured. They're being abused by the police. If you look at Azov, you talk about Azov controls all the regional and local police. Pravi sector controls the national security apparatus, SBU, etc. Okay, so you have a neo-Nazi abusing somebody. They go to the police, and it's the boss of the guy that's abusing them. What do you think is going to happen? Right?
You're going to get arrested.
Now, yeah, now.
And keep tortured.
They're going to get tortured or disappeared. It doesn't make the news. It doesn't.
Of course.
In Ukraine. Now, let's look at Andrei Belitsky. Is he a neo-Nazi? Or is he a real Nazi? That's a point that needs to be settled. Mm-hmm. Huh?
You tell me.
When Slava Stetsko started that political party, the Congress of Ukrainian Nationalists, and Dmitry Yarosh was her bodyguard and the head of Trizub, Benderi, the regional leader for Dnieper, Andrei Belitsky, he learned his politics from a 1930s, 1940s Nazi.
So he is the Nazi.
That was the head of a group that murdered a million people. 11 million. Now, I'm actually in the middle of rewriting the history of Ukraine. I'm actually qualified to do this. According to, now the history's there, but it's in 100 different pieces. So you can't put it together unless you know what you're looking at and what information to look for. But in real terms, and what current scholarship says, is that without Ukrainian involvement, there could not have been a Holocaust. It couldn't have happened because they did it all, the Ukrainian nationals. And then you have the Ukrainian Holocaust, which no one talks about. You had 5.6 million people murdered, and no one answered for this. No one answered for this. This is the politic that's in Kiev today. It's of Slava Stetsko. She started the military action. The nationalists have a free hand to start that over and cleanse the whole country. And that is a scary thing.
It is.
Next question.
In your opinion, for what reason does the American political leadership ignore the connection of the Ukrainian military and the battalions controlled by them with neo-Nazism? Or are they just turning a blind eye to it?
Neither. They're using it. Are using it. The Ukrainian diaspora has poisoned the entire, I won't say the entire U.S. government, it's all of Democrats, almost all, and some Republicans. But the way they poison them is by graft. It's how much money they're giving them. And that's a shame on the American system that this kind of thing is allowed. They're not representing American interests. If these congressmen and the current president were representing American interests, they would have made Vladimir Zelensky clean up the mess last year when he had a chance to save his own country. And honestly, Donald Trump would have made him do that. interfered in the 2016 election and politics from that point on in America in a very, very big way. I actually found, you know about the January 6th insurrection,
Of course.
Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I found Ukrainians at the forefront of all the violence, as of. At the time, they were also, they had a couple other operations going on in Chile and Venezuela. The commander that they call Botsman, Chile, and I think he was in Washington, D.C. The other commander, and he's actually in charge of inciting violence in crowds. His name is Maxim Yarosh. Videos of him pop up with people getting tied to posts and beaten up, that kind of thing. That's a hobby of his. He was in Washington, D.C. So the conversation turns around to what the Ukrainians are doing. And you have about, my last best estimate is about 17,000 of the Ukrainian nationalists from the battlefield here moved to the United States. They moved to Seattle, and they're backing up Antifa there, where all the violence is. A couple different large cities where the violence spiked. The U.S. is bringing this on themselves. It's going back. All the money they're giving Ukraine is sending violence back. And they're going to do this to the UK, to Germany, to Canada, the same thing. So it's, you're going to pay for it now and pay for it later too, with violence.
What do you know, besides what you already mentioned, about American biochemical laboratories in Ukraine? How would you comment on the fact that the employees of those laboratories tested their pathogens on underage children?
That is just disgusting that that's done. You have the children, you have soldiers, you have normal people in mental hospitals, anybody that really. Part of what I meant about they're treating the Ukrainians like they're Russian because they're Russian. They're not Ukrainian nationalists. So they killing the children, it's fine because the children are subhuman according to their standards. You know, as a normal person, you look at this, you think about this. How could somebody do that? How could you look into the eyes of the child? You can't. A normal person can't, but a nationalist can. And that's the virus that needs to be stamped out ultimately. Right. That virus.
As an investigative journalist who is engaged in exposing fakes, how do you assess Kyiv's provocation broadcast by practically all major Western media, and why don't they tell people the truth?
Well, most media is caught up in the information operation that's been going on since 2014. In 2015, I exposed its strategic communication laboratories. It was run by a man named Nigel Oakes, okay, and Alexander Nix. They were hired to do the information operation here. But what people didn't realize, okay, the information operation against Russia, see, they don't care what Russia says. Russia can talk among themselves all they want. They really don't care. They just needed to shut Russia down in the West. So Russia can talk to itself, but we got the West. They designed everything to take over Western media. And one of the ways they did this is they set up an office in what was known then as the Broadcasting Board of Governors. It's a board. Now, you know the publications that they have there. Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, right?
Yeah.
Well, they also, after 2012, when they changed the Schmidt-Mundt Act, they made propaganda and information operations legal in the U.S. So the company was literally running U.S. policy, and afterward, they're doing the same. They actually had someone inside the board. The person that changed the law had was the only permanent seat on the Board of Broadcasting Governors. And they set the narrative for the United States media. So whether it's Fox News, CNN, or whatever, here's the media, Russia's evil, okay? Don't care what the story is, but Russia's evil, all right? Someone named Russia saved an old lady that was drowning. No, someone named Russia tried to drown an old lady and she got away. That's the story, all right? It's no matter what happens, Russia's evil. So Russia's evil, Ukraine's good. And that's when they turned all the intelligence coming out of Ukraine was coming out of the information operations. Pravi Sector was writing all the intel and news that was coming out of Ukraine from 2014 all the way through 2017. And they've started back up again. Now they have added more groups, but that's why the media they haven't given a fair hearing to anything. The other part of it is if they go against it, they'll be cut out of access. Now, imagine being a national media outfit like CNN or Fox News, and all of a sudden you don't have access to the White House, to Congress, to any national thing. What will that do to you? It'll make you a regional news agency real fast. State level, they do the same thing. Do you even have a media company left at that point? You have no advertising left.
Right.
That's the deal. They either comply or they fall by the wayside. It's over.
In your opinion, what is the real number of American and British mercenaries taking part in the conflict in Ukraine?
Very difficult question. I've actually avoided looking into that because I get very, very disgusted. I know that, as far as Americans, there might be 1,000 of them here. Brits, maybe 2,000 or better. They're just everywhere. But these are the worst of the worst in societies. Now, the Ukrainian nationalists in all these countries, America included, they actually join the military to get experience, stay years, so they can come here and fight. Now, with a population like they have in America, it's a little over 1 million. And that's just the Ukrainians. They're also ahead of a group that has 38 diasporas. So those people are coming too. So that's why I figure maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 of them here.
The statements of the British political leadership regarding the events in Ukraine clearly define their anti-Russian position. How do you assess the influence of the British elites on what is happening now on the territory of Ukraine?
They're running, the Brits have been running Ukraine. British companies. And you've got to understand that the best of breed information operations came out of Britain. The company that was running it and may still be today, I know the same manager is there. They were called IOTA Global. And in Britain, or actually in the world, they are the only information operations company, it's a private company, that has to get military licensing. That means they themselves can put boots on the ground anywhere. Now, they also designed NATO's information operations program, okay? They designed a NATO course. NATO uses their material. Strategic communication labs for NATO. The same thing. Ukraine does. The Ukrainian diaspora does. So they're all on the same page. So look at it as, at that end of it, as British run. And if they're controlling the information, what aren't they controlling? They're controlling everything.
How would you comment on the agreement between Warsaw and Kyiv, according to which Poland will gain control over the western territories of Ukraine? Does this mean that Kyiv has handed over control of its country to Poland?
Well, this has been going back and forth for 100 years. You had the intermarium where they were going to get together. And before that, let's see, what other group? A group for all of the Eastern and Central European countries. We just decided where that border should be. And West Ukraine has wanted to break free. They've made overtures of breaking free and going back to Poland for, I believe, since 2017. They started doing that. Now, will there be a problem with that between Ukraine and Poland? Well, as soon as Ukraine's done with this situation, they'll be going to war with Poland. You can count on it. That's going to happen. But until this situation's over, they're both united against Russia. And they actually, in the US, the diaspora of Poland actually runs the show. Okay, what's going on? The diaspora, the Polish diaspora and the Ukrainian diaspora, which is running what's going on in the government of Ukraine, made a deal. We won't fight each other until we destroy Russia.
I see.
So you have an agreement. So what do you do with that? They hate each other. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean,
Right.
That's how they look at each other. And that's about it. There's no good blood there.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as Poland's taking that area, whether they like it.
Yeah. Why, in your opinion, does the Zelensky administration refuse to sign peace agreements with the Russian Federation?
Well, the first thing is, I honestly believe that when Zelensky was running, that he actually believed that, okay, I can do this. All right, I'll make the peace. We'll redo the country. And he was just an ignorant, blind kid trying to whatever in Kolomoisky's pocket. All right. Right after he won the election, what happened? He got on a plane. He went to the United States. He went to New York because the guy that's actually running the whole thing is in New York. Is Mr. Poslowski. Now, you may not know his name, but his brother was fighting for Donbass Battalion here in 2014 and was shot and killed. Poslowski vowed revenge and turned every penny that the diaspora has on Russia at that point. All right, that's what really kicked this into high gear. But he told Zelensky what's what, who's what, and who you little dancer think you are. You're going to do what we say. Now, they want a war with Russia. So what Zelensky does, Zelensky stopped Russia. And he embraced it. Yeah, he's an actor. He's embracing a role. Does he want peace? No. Why? Because the second he announces, any real steps to peace, they're going to assassinate him. If he keeps the war going, he can always leave. He really doesn't care about the people. He can leave. And it's made him so much money, it's crazy. He was a millionaire when he got in. He's a billionaire now. So what's not to like from his perspective? Because he really doesn't like the Ukrainian people. He doesn't care for them. It's a job. So I can't even express the kind of contempt I have for that kind of person, that kind of government. All like that.
In your opinion, how and when will Russia's special military operation on the territory of Ukraine end?
You're going to have to ask somebody that has a higher pay grade than me. I have no idea. Whenever they finish whatever, actually, Vladimir Putin spelled it out. He's going to denazify Ukraine. So when President Putin is happy that he's accomplished that mission, then he'll end it. I don't make those kind of predictions because you've got so many different variables involved, and nobody invites me to the strategy meeting. So, I don't know what they're going, what it is that they have planned. Did you or I or anybody else realize when they first started, this mission to protect human life? That was what? Well, and then you see situations like Bucha, where trying to save human life, and the Azov murdered all these people, and in the media you see the humanitarian aid. You see them, that the victims have the white armbands, and they have the humanitarian aid kits given by Russian soldiers. Well, nobody gives humanitarian aid and then turns around and kills people.
Right.
And then leaves the evidence. It just doesn't happen that way. So in terms of what Russia's doing or going to do, you have a lot to answer for, and that might be adding on to Russia's strategy. So I really couldn't say beyond that.